The great Australian dream, more like a nightmare. Remember the good old days? You know, when people could actually afford to buy a house. Those days are long gone, especially in Australia. The great Australian dream of owning a home is now nothing more than a cruel joke for many. We're talking about a land where houses are ludicrously expensive. The cost of living is enough to make you weep. Oh, the irony. Let's be real for a second. The average Aussie is struggling to keep up with the skyrocketing house prices. It's like trying to outrun a cheetah on a unicycle. You're just not going to win. The gap between incomes and house prices is wider than ever, and it's pushing the dream of homeownership further out of reach. The worst part? It's not just the big cities. Sure, Sydney and Melbourne are ridiculously expensive, but even smaller towns are getting in on the action. Gone are the days of affordable coastal havens or quaint country escapes. Now you're lucky to find a parking space for less than $1 million. It's enough to make you want to pack your bags and move to, well, anywhere else, really. But don't lose hope just yet. There's still a glimmer of hope for aspiring homeowners down under. Stay tuned. Cardboard boxes, the new starter homes. First-time buyers, beware. The Australian property market is not for the faint of heart. Imagine this, you've finally saved up a deposit. You're ready to buy your first home. You open up the real estate apps, excited to start your search, and then, BAM! Reality hits you harder than a kangaroo in a boxing match. The properties you can actually afford are, well, let's just say they leave a lot to be desired. Think shoebox apartments with more leaks than a colander. Think charming fixer-uppers that require a degree in structural engineering. Think sharing a bathroom with 6 other people because, hey, at least it's close to the city, right? The competition is fierce. You're up against cashed-up investors, property developers with more money than sense, and your neighbor's pet goldfish who somehow managed to secure a mortgage. It's a jungle out there, and only the strongest or luckiest survive. But don't despair. There are still ways to navigate this crazy market. With a bit of creativity, a dash of persistence, and maybe a loan from your very generous grandparents, you might just find your place in the sun, or at least a place with a roof and 4 walls. When avocado toast costs more than a mortgage, almost. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, affordability, or rather, the lack thereof. The rising cost of living in Australia is enough to make your head spin faster than a Hills hoist in a cyclone. From groceries to petrol to that daily cup of coffee, which, let's face it, is practically a human right, everything seems to be going up in price except for our wages. Remember those avocado toast jokes? Turns out they weren't far off the mark. The cost of living is so high that millennials are practically being priced out of existence. Forget about buying a house. These days it's a struggle just to afford rent, bills, and the occasional smashed Avo on toast. Hold the feta, please, it's cheaper that way. It's enough to make you want to throw your hands up in the air and say, stuff it, I'm moving to Bali and becoming a yoga instructor. And hey, who could blame you? But before you book that one-way ticket, let's look at some ways to cope with the financial pressure cooker that is Australian life. Remember when moving back in with your parents was considered a last resort? Well, those days are gone. In today's economy, it's becoming increasingly common for young adults to boomerang back to their childhood bedrooms. And who can blame them? With house prices soaring higher than a kookaburra on a sugar high, sometimes living with mum and dad is the only way to save for a deposit. But it's not just about the money. The housing crisis is forcing young people to delay major life milestones. Getting married, starting a family, buying a house. All of these dreams are being put on hold as young Australians struggle to find affordable housing. It's a societal shift that's having a ripple effect across the country. From delayed retirements to multi-generational households, the Australian dream is undergoing a serious makeover. But is it a change for the better, or are we simply delaying the inevitable? The impact of Australia's housing affordability crisis goes far beyond just financial stress. It's affecting our mental health, our relationships, and our overall well-being. The constant pressure to make ends meet, the fear of missing out on the property ladder, and the feeling of being left behind can take a toll on even the most resilient individuals. We're seeing a rise in anxiety and depression among young people. Relationships are being strained under the weight of financial pressure, and the dream of owning a home, once a symbol of hope and security, is now a source of stress and frustration for many. It's time to stop and ask ourselves, what kind of future are we creating? Are we content to let the housing crisis define a generation? Or are we ready to demand better for ourselves, for our children, and for the future of Australia? So, we've painted a pretty bleak picture of the Australian property market. But don't lose hope just yet. While it's true that the market is tough, it's not impossible to break into. It just requires a combination of hard work, smart planning, and maybe a little bit of luck. Okay, maybe a lot of luck. First things first, you need to get your finances in order. That means saving like your life depends on it. Because let's face it, your dream home might just depend on it. It means cutting back on unnecessary expenses. Sorry, daily lattes. And it means exploring all your options, from government grants to first home buyer schemes. Next, you need to do your research. Know your budget, know your needs, and know your limits. Don't be afraid to ask for help from professionals like mortgage brokers and financial advisors. They can guide you through the process and help you make informed decisions. And finally, be patient. The road to homeownership is rarely a straight line. There will be bumps along the way, moments of doubt, and maybe even a few tears. But remember why you started this journey in the first place. Remember the feeling of excitement when you imagined yourself finally owning your own home. Hold on to that dream and don't give up. Owning a home in Australia might be a challenge, but it's not impossible. With the right mindset, the right strategy, and maybe a little bit of help from the universe, you can make the Australian dream a reality. And hey, if all else fails, there's always Bali and that yoga instructor gig. Just saying.